Gomer Pyle, and the General of Hearts. The morning sun at the military base brought with it an air of unexpected diplomatic excitement. Sergeant Carter stood at attention, though his face carried a look of curious anticipation as he was summoned to the office of his superior. Upon entering, he saw a familiar, flamboyant figure. The colonel looked up and gestured toward their guest. He told Sergeant Carter that his old amigo, General Cortez, had arrived. The general was on his way to Washington and had made a special stop over just to visit with them. He would be staying overnight, and while the colonel had offered to host a reception in his honor, the general had insisted on spending his time with the sergeant and his men. Sergeant Carter felt truly honored. The colonel then left the responsibility for the general's comfort and entertainment entirely in the hands of the sergeant, offering his office as a base for their planning. General Cortez smiled warmly, expressing that he had not forgotten how kind the sergeant had been to him in the past. He announced that tonight they would celebrate his visit with a night on the town. When the sergeant asked if there was any place special the general had in mind, the general's eyes lit up. He requested the most special place with the best dancing, the best dining, and the best wine. Sergeant Carter suggested a place called the Club Chi-Chi. The general agreed enthusiastically, declaring that was exactly where they would go. At that moment, Gomer Pyle appeared, his face beaming with a wide, innocent grin. He exclaimed in surprise, calling out to General Cortez and asking what in the world he was doing there. Gomer began to offer a formal salute, but the general stopped him, insisting they were friends and did not need such formalities. The general noted that Gomer had work to do, but promised they would talk more later. He then extended an invitation, telling Gomer he would be his guest tonight in town along with Sergeant Carter. Gomer, ever humble, said he appreciated the invitation but did not want to be in the way. The general brushed off the concern, saying it would not be an evening without him and that it was going to be a big reunion. He told Gomer he would see him outside the barracks at 6 o'clock. Gomer promised to be ready, and the general departed with a cheerful farewell in his native tongue. Later that evening, Sergeant Carter found himself in a bit of a predicament with his girlfriend, Bunny. He explained to her that he could not take her along because it was an order from the colonel. He tried to justify it by suggesting the general might want to talk business or diplomatic matters like foreign relations. Bunny was disappointed, but the sergeant insisted there was not going to be any dancing. However, when the time for the meeting arrived, Gomer noticed something unusual about the general's attire. He asked if the general was wearing a naval uniform. The general confirmed this, explaining that he was not only a general of the army, but also the first admiral of the navy. Gomer was confused, recalling a map of the general's country that showed no water nearby. The general admitted they did not have a navy yet, but when they did, he would be ready. Sergeant Carter arrived and was also surprised by the uniform, but the general simply said it was proper to call him by either title. As they prepared to leave, the sergeant tried to pull the general aside. He mentioned that he had canceled a date with a young lady so they could talk shop. The general was horrified to hear this, feeling terrible that a lady had been left behind on his account. He immediately asked if the señorita would care to join them. Gomer was delighted and said the more the merrier. The general was so impressed by the phrase that he asked if Gomer had made it up himself. Sergeant Carter quickly called Bunny to ask her to join them at the club. At the Club Chi-Chi, the atmosphere was lively. Bunny was introduced to General Cortez, and he was immediately taken by her beauty. He insisted she call him Manuel. He called for a bottle of the best wine and questioned why the musicians were not playing. When Gomer suggested they were just taking a rest, the general insisted on lovely music to match the loveliness of Bunny. Sergeant Carter whispered to Bunny to just go along with him, explaining it was his assignment. Bunny admitted she thought the general was quite cute. The general then ordered the band to play all night, featuring everything from rumbas to a dance from his country called the San Miguel Boogaloo. He invited Bunny to dance, and she happily accepted. As the night went on, the general became more and more enamored. He toasted to Bunny's beauty, specifically mentioning the rosy lobe of her left ear. When he insisted on toasting her right ear as well, Bunny joked that she was running out of earlobes. When the check arrived, the general insisted on paying, offering a note of 100,000 pesos. However, The waiter informed them that they did not accept foreign money. Furthermore, it turned out that 100,000 pesos was only worth $7 in American money, while the bill was $56.50. Sergeant Carter was left to cover the difference. The next day, the general found Gomer and shared a secret of the heart. He confessed he was in love with Bunny. Gomer was worried, pointing out that Bunny was Sergeant Carter's girl. The general was surprised, noting that the sergeant had not danced with her much the night before. Gomer explained that the general had not given him a chance. Feeling a bit ashamed but still determined, the general decided that since they were not officially engaged, he would stay to woo her. He declared that the battle of love was on, and may the best man win. Gomer went to warn Bunny about the general's serious intentions. Bunny, however, thought it might be fun to let the general court her for a while, hoping it might make Sergeant Carter a little jealous and get him to commit. She ignored Gomer's warnings and agreed to go out with the general. The general insisted that Gomer come along as a chaperone, or duenna, explaining that as a man of hot blood, he needed someone there to keep things proper. The afternoon was filled with music and romantic compliments. The general told Bunny her eyes were brighter than the lake and her smile warmer than the sun. He then dropped a bombshell on Gomer. He had decided to ask Bunny for her hand in marriage that very night. Sergeant Carter, unaware of the impending proposal, told Gomer to go to the club with the general again that evening while he finished some work. Gomer tried to hint that Bunny might not always be available if the sergeant kept taking her for granted, but the sergeant brushed him off. At the club, the general prepared to propose. Gomer desperately tried to get Bunny to discourage him. When the general finally made his move, he described a life for Bunny in his country where she would have maids, a chef, and a limousine. However, he also mentioned she would be told what to wear, who to entertain, and would have to devote 24 hours a day to him. Bunny, realizing this was not the life she wanted, began to describe her own habits. She told him she liked the seashore, which the general hated because it was sandy. She said she liked to cook wieners and sauerkraut and preferred to stay home with her hair in curlers watching television. The general, realizing they were completely incompatible, quickly withdrew his proposal. He claimed his country was expecting a revolution and he had to return to his regiment. He bid them a hasty farewell, calling Bunny a stubborn and willful woman. In the end, Sergeant Carter arrived, happy to see Bunny. General Cortez prepared to leave for Washington, telling Gomer that his search for the perfect woman continued. He noted that when one balloon of love bursts, you can always blow up another. He said goodbye to his old friend Gomer and departed, leaving the young Marine and his friends to their peaceful life at the base.